Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Adrienne and today I'm going to be discussing my 10 favorite books of 2023. These are the 10 books that stood out to me after reading 86 books in 2023. I had such a good reading year. This is the highest number of books that I've read in one year, and I had an absolute great time doing it. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. First one I'm going to talk about is Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jesse Sutanto. That title is so long, but this is a cozy mystery, and it is the only cozy mystery on this list. This book follows Vera Wong. She's an older character. She is now a widow and living alone in Chinatown above her tea shop, when one morning she comes downstairs and finds a dead body. After that, she decides to help the police investigate, even though they don't really want her to. And multiple people from the dead man's life end up coming into the picture, trying to get more information, whether it's his spouse or other kind of suspicious characters. And this book is so quirky and cute, funny. Vera Wong as a character is just so wonderful. She's like a grandmother figure. She bosses everyone around her around, but you can also see her more vulnerable side and that she's very sad missing her family. Throughout this book, I just grew to love the characters in it. Vera Wong is organizing her group of suspects, but she also loves them. We grow to love them, and we're just really spending the book hoping that none of them murdered the dead guy, because the dead guy is probably not the greatest person. That's the thing about cozy mysteries, a lot of time a bad person dies. So as I was reading, I was just hoping that everything would work out for my favorite characters. I did love all the tea conversations. I'm a big tea lover myself, and I loved her mixing up special brews for her customers and also trying to keep her business running because it's not doing so well. So for these, I kind of think it's organized from lighter to darker, more serious books. So to carry on that trajectory, I have The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. This book follows Mika Moon. She is a witch, and in this book, witches keep their magic a secret, but Mika really wants to share some of her magic and potion making. So she makes a YouTube channel where she's pretending to be a witch. Someone finds that video and believes that she really is a witch and offers to hire her to help raise 3 witch children on their kind of secluded estate. So witches in this world are usually orphans. The mother witch usually dies, which we kind of find out why and what caused that and work on a remedy for it. But Mika Moon goes here, and there's this big found family with a variety of characters that are, again, so precious. The children are skeptical of her at first. She's never been a teacher, and they've never really gotten trained on how to use their magic. So Mika is trying to help them control it, use it gently, and be able to function normally in society while having powers. And she herself learns so much about herself. She gets a family that she never got to have growing up as an orphan. And we also see how she affects the secret society of witches, these other adult witches that only meet once a month to keep their secret safe. And she kind of has an effect on, should it be such a secret? Should we have to be so guarded and so alone in our magic? And it just ended up being very beautiful. There's a romance involved, and it gave me the warm, fuzzy feelings that I don't often get even from cozy mysteries, so I loved it. Okay, last kind of cozy thing before we take a dark turn. This is Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. This is a book following... I literally just looked through the pages to try to remind myself of the main character's name. This book follows Tress. She grew up on this little island, which there's some really cool magic going on here. The ocean is made out of plant spores, so even though it's the ocean, you can't get it wet because the plants explode, and there's all these cool things going on with the atmosphere and landscape. But Tress has never left this little island, and she has a relationship with Charlie, who's the Duke's son, and through a series of events she ends up leaving her island and going onto a pirate ship. So this book felt a lot different than the normal Brandon Sanderson books that I've read, but in a good, refreshing way. This book had like some interesting plot points, a very well constructed story, but it was fun, it was soft and gentle, and it was just a good time. Again, this feels cozy. I couldn't stop turning the pages, and I was just having so much fun on this pirate ship as Tress really figures out herself and her life away from the island. But she is on a mission while she's there, so they do some dangerous things. She gets into some tricky situations, but just her determination to get her mission accomplished and the way that everything turned out at the end, it was just such a good time. It's very much a fairy tale, and the story is being told to us, so you kind of know that things are gonna work out. But once you get to the end and see how it all works out, like, it's weird and silly, but it was a great time. And now we're taking that dark turn. No more cute and cozy. So next up I have Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. This book is a thriller that has a time travel element. So at the very beginning of the book, this woman sees her son murder somebody. But then the next morning when she wakes up, it's the day before. And basically she's going back in time and seeing things about her son and her family that maybe she hadn't noticed the first time that she lived that day. And she's trying to figure out what her son has gotten into and why he ends up in this position where he feels like he has to murder somebody. So something pretty unique about this story is while she's time traveling, she seeks out this man who has an interest in time travel. He's some sort of scientist, and she seeks him out to tell him, like, I'm time traveling. What should I do? How do you think I can stop this? And oftentimes in books about time travel, the time travel is a secret, or maybe they tell somebody once and then they don't tell anyone again. But in this one, she told people in her life a couple of times, and then she repeatedly sought out this scientist to talk to, and like, she knows how to get him to believe that she's time traveling faster each time she seeks him out. And a lot of times in time travel, the character feels very alone. And she did, of course, have those feelings because nobody else was experiencing it with her, and the people she talked to wouldn't remember the next time she traveled back in time. But it was just fun that she could collaborate or sometimes react in a moment to something and tell them, and then it would erase and she would still do it again. Like, I loved that she could interact with people and try to get help while she's trying to solve what the heck is happening. And the mystery of it was super intriguing. A lot of the books here, one of the biggest parts that I remember is how quickly I was reading them, how much I had trouble putting them down, and how much I wanted to keep picking them back up. I had plenty of duds this year as well. So my favorite thing about my favorites this year is how much they made me want to keep reading. And this one was definitely a page turner. Next up, we have a dark thriller, All the Dangerous Things by Stacey Willingham. This is the same author as A Flicker in the Dark, which I thought was pretty good, but I think this one is even better. This book follows a woman who a year ago, her toddler son was kidnapped from her house while she was sleeping. And since then, she still doesn't know what happened, who took him, and her life has fallen apart and completely changed. So she and her husband weren't able to stay together, things got too messy. She also hasn't been sleeping, so she has a crazy sleep disorder which completely controls and affects her life. But her main focus in life is just finding her son. And there's a lot of discussion about criminal cases whenever they don't have any leads, and it just drops off. You know, the detectives stop following up with you because they have nothing to say. And a lot of times in thrillers we get a fresh case, so it was interesting to read from the perspective of someone whose case has kind of been forgotten about. People have moved on from it, but our main character, she's still as desperate to find out what happened as she was 1 year ago when it started. And it also discusses true crime. She doesn't like true crime culture and how people become obsessed with these things and romanticize or turn true crime into a big source of entertainment. But she does also have to get involved with it because those true crime people often help solve cases or get the word out or find a clue that may help. So there's kind of a discussion about, you know, the good and bad of true crime things. And then I really enjoyed that there's a sleep disorder, which is a very, very common trope in thrillers, but I feel like it was handled much differently. We also dip into our main character's past, her childhood, some things that happened there. And again, it was fun. No longer cozy, but still a fun time. Next we have All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. I honestly was afraid to read this book and S.A. Cosby in general because, I don't know, I just thought he was going to be too dark for me and I didn't want to read anything too disturbing, but I'm so glad I read this book. I read this and a few of these actually for my Goodreads challenge of reading the whole mystery thriller category, and this one really surprised me. We follow a detective in a small town in the US South, and it's a very complex relationship that he has with them. He's a former FBI agent and he's now the sheriff, but he is a black man in a rather racist old school town. So there is some conflict that comes from that, but also his relationship has changed with the black community there. Even his own friends now don't see him as black, they see him as blue. He is a sheriff now, and that builds a wall between him and the rest of the community. But in here we start off with a school shooting. This is a very high anxiety, tense start to a book, and the former student, he kills one of the most beloved teachers at the school, and then he ends up getting killed by the police. But he does tell them to check that teacher's phone, which we find out he was into some very dark, horrible things. In the phone, we also see that there's another man involved and we don't know who that is. So this book is spent trying to find out who that other man is, but then also just exploring this small town dynamics, and it was so good. I loved our sheriff main character so much. Like, he wasn't cute, he wasn't sweet, he was just like a good man. He was just like a good man in a complicated situation. He's just a very like good person. He has some dark things from his past that he feels like he did wrong, which we find out more about that. And he just feels like a debt and a guilt to the world, and he wants to keep his town safe, and he really feels like it's his burden, his cross to bear to take care of these people, whether they like him or not, whether they want him to be sheriff next term or not. And I really enjoyed that about him. Also, he lives with his dad and helps take care of him, and he has a brother, so there's some complicated family dynamics. I loved this and I want to pick up way more S.A. Cosby now. Next we have The September House by Carissa Orlando. I've seen love and hate for this book, but I just thought it was so good. So this is a haunted house book. The basic premise of the haunted house is that weird things happen, but especially in September, everything gets way worse. So there are always visible ghosts to our main character and noises and, you know, physical things that happen in the house. But in September, the walls bleed. There's constant screaming. There's horrible things going on in the boarded up basement. And it's very dramatic, this haunted house, but also a little bit funny. Like, there is a ghost of a maid who she cleans, she cooks, she takes care of our main character, but she's like brutally murdered. She has an axe through her head. And the way that the maid ghost, she doesn't talk, but the way that she expresses herself and reacts to our main character is pretty funny and silly. But our main character's husband, who she bought the house with, is no longer there, and she hasn't told her daughter that they had a big fight. And at the beginning, she finally tells her daughter that her husband left her, and her daughter's like, well, where is he? She's like, I don't know. She's like, why wouldn't you tell me? And I'm gonna come there and I'm gonna find him and we're gonna figure this out. And she's just doesn't want her daughter to come because the house is haunted and it's September and it's a mess, what's going on there, but she wants to keep keep it from her daughter, and she just has a very weird relationship with the house. And there ends up being a lot of reveals, which again go darker, but it's so good. And the way that this woman staying in this horribly haunted house really represents people staying in situations that they shouldn't, and people ignoring things that are happening to them when they shouldn't. It was just so good and so well done. And there is information about the house and why it's haunted and the people that are haunting it that gets super dark. But again, it's still funny. I thought this book was just brilliant. I can't wait to read more by Carissa Orlando. Her blend of darkness and humor together, I just thought was so good. And I love what everything in the story represented. And now we have None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I love Lisa Jewell so much. Her writing is just perfect for me. Every time I pick up one of her books, I'm flying through the pages or I can't stop listening to the audiobook. Her writing just works for me so much. So this book follows two women. One of them is seemingly doing well in life. She has a famous podcast. She has a bunch of friends. Our other woman is in a weird marital situation. She is very alone and she's very sad. So she sees the other woman in a restaurant. They share a birthday and she approaches her in the bathroom and is like, oh hey, starts up chatting and conversation, and she's just comparing her life to this other woman's life and feeling bad about herself. So she tells the other woman, the podcaster, that she's ready to make a big change in her life, and they end up making a podcast about her deciding to change her life. So in those discussions, we are getting a history of what brought her to this point in her life, the history of her childhood and her relationship with her husband. And it's like weird and dark and bad things going on and happening, but it's twisty because it's called None of This Is True. So there's like things that we're told, and then we're told maybe that's not what happened, and then we're told some other things that happened. It was just twisty and weird, and the dynamics between the women ends up getting messy and uncomfortable, but I couldn't stop reading it. It was so much fun, but so dark, but so much fun. Okay, next up, I think I can't use the word fun with this one. It is Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. I had never planned on reading this book. Again, it was for that Goodreads video, and I'm just so glad I did. This book took everything, even that I'm saying about the books right here, everything that I said, and makes me feel bad about it. This book is a little bit inspired by Ted Bundy, the first celebrity serial killer. And we're following a woman in a sorority who her sorority sisters get attacked and some of them killed, and other worse things happening to them by this man. And we are going through the aftermath of that and the investigation and the trial, all of that story of what happened after the crime and her being a witness and that whole situation and how she's treated and all this stuff. But the way that it's written really takes the mystery out of it. From the beginning, you know that this crime happens, but we already know that he was executed for his crimes. We already know that it's over. The story is told in a way where it takes out the mystery and it takes out the thrills, and it makes you feel like this is a horrible story, which it is. This is a horrible story about what happened to some women, and 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 sometimes we, including myself, get entertainment value out of these things, but how it's actually awful and not entertaining, which yes and no, that's true, but I absolutely loved the message of this book. Again, it was not fun. I actually cried, and I even cried talking about it in my Goodreads video because it was so impactful. the story that we were told and discussing the victims, and then we were following another perspective of another potential victim, and it was so heartbreaking and just so sad and heavy. But it was also giving the victims and everyone affected by what happened a platform, instead of us just being entertained by the serial killer. So in the book, we never are told the killer's name, which was just brilliant, because it's like, that's not the name we should be discussing. We should be discussing the victims. And it's talking about how the media sensationalizes these cases, and how you talk about like, oh, he was so handsome, or girls loved him, or but did they really, or are you selling it this way for entertainment value? Just taking the focus off of the disgusting human and putting it on the victims was just so wonderful. And I'm not guilt tripping anyone about this. I mean, I'm currently deep into the Dan Markel murder Reddit page, and the Alex Murdaugh trial, I mean, I was hooked. So I'm so torn, because I get why people are entertained by this. It's not like we're having fun. We are like, it's fascinating, and we want to see like somebody go to prison if they did a crime. But it's also like, why are you saying Alex Murdaugh's name instead of the victim's name? You know? It's just, it was just powerful, and I feel like it didn't shame me, but it also made me think about things. Murder is not just for entertainment value, you know? But it's such a good book. And then finally, I have Blood SisterScribe by Emma Torres. First off, I wish this had a sequel. I would read so much more in this world. I realized a theme in my favorite books. I love thrillers, obviously, but I also love books that are another genre and feel like a thriller. This is an urban fantasy. There's a lot of magic. There are magic people, there are magic wielders, there are spells, spell books, but it's so much read like a thriller. So we have two sisters who, one has stayed in her hometown her whole life, and she's protecting this library of spell books that her father started the collection of. At the very beginning of the book, we find out that her father was actually killed by one of the spell books, so that's one of the mysteries we're trying to figure out, what happened there. And then her sister is always on the move. Since she was 18 years old, she hardly ever sees her, or she never sees her. They just write letters, and she is currently in Antarctica on a mission, and her dad had told her when she was 18 that she has to stay on the move, and every year on a certain date she has to stay in motion the whole time to keep herself safe. And this year when she's in Antarctica, she falls in love, and she decides to stay there on another mission to be with this woman that she loves, and she does not stay in motion on that day. So then people are after her, and she's trying to figure out why and who and how, because she starts seeing some magical signs around the base that she's in. So she's trying to figure that out there, and then her sister back home is trying to get some information out of their mother about this crazy history and what happened to her father. And then we have another character, this man who's actually deep into magical society, and he's a very valuable magic wielder, and he has some really cool powers that we get to see. And all of these characters have all these things going on that end up being a part of a bigger story, a big plot line, where they're just players in this huge conspiracy. And it was just so cool. I loved the magic in here, and it was just so interesting to have a book that has so much magic, but there's also like so many gunfights and so many chase scenes that it was just a perfect mix of magic and thriller. And it also had some really cool relationships, and again, super cool magic. Like, I love the magic so much, and just finding out how it worked was a big mystery on its own. All right, so that is it. These are the 10 best books that I read this year. I'm so pleased with my reading, and I feel like I've really honed in on my reading taste. Although 2024, I feel like I need to break out of it a little bit. Maybe I'm leaning a little too much into my own taste, but anyways, I had a great reading time. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have similar favorites to mine, please tell me what you would recommend for fans of these books, because I'm always looking for recommendations. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.